As the summer travel season approaches, I'm excited to let you know about 2 upcoming Taste Travels, our immersive travel series hosted by cookbook authors and me, Matt Rodbard. On June 15th, I will be joining the Mediterranean dish author Susie Carace in Barcelona for an incredible week of culinary tours, cooking classes, and plenty of wine and jamon. And on September 15th, I will be joining author and baker Mauricio Leo of The Perfect Loaf for a tour of northern Italy. We will visit artisanal Parmigiano Reggiano and balsamic vinegar producers, take a masterclass in the art of panettone, and of course, eat plenty of stuffed pasta and mortadella in and around Emilia-Romagna. Both trips are nearly sold out and closing soon. If interested, write into hello@tastecooking.com and we will get you the information. That's hello@tastecooking.com. I hope to see you on one of our taste travels this summer.
My mother made the most amazing breakfast. She would make her own chorizo. She would fry potatoes. She made the most amazingly beautiful scrambled eggs. Like, they were the most perfect scrambled eggs I've ever had in my entire life. And then there was always salsa. And I think that's really when I started to really appreciate salsa.
This is Taste. I'm your host, Eliza Barbanel. It's so special having Rick Martinez on the show to talk about his very fun new cookbook, Salsa Daddy. Rick is the author of the best-selling cookbook Mi Cocina, Recipes and Rapture from My Kitchen in Mexico, and Salsa Daddy is just as delicious. It's a salsa-first approach to cooking, with more than 70 salsa recipes that anchor 24 meals, from torta de milanesa to pozole verde, and I can already tell it's going to change my cooking for the better. Also on the show, I chat with author Emma Christensen about the joy of brewing drinks at home with help from her great new cookbook, Hard Seltzer, Iced Tea, Kombucha, and Cider. Rick Martinez, this is Taste. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. So excited.
I'm so happy we get to catch up. We overlapped at Bon Appetit together for a bit, and now I just wistfully wish that I was living with you in Mexico.
You are welcome to come visit anytime.
I'm going to knock on your door.
Amazing. Please do. Right now actually is the perfect time to be here because, well, obviously in the US, the weather's insane. Here it's 70 and no clouds, beautiful sunshine. It's amazing.
Yeah, I'm so curious, what's the Mazatlan vibe check these days? How is life going for you down there?
It's amazing. The people here are so incredibly inviting and generous and kind. And that was part of the draw for me. I got here right as the pandemic started. And my plan was only to ever stay here for a couple of weeks. And then I would eventually, keep driving around researching Mi Cocina. It just felt so comfortable, being here. I mean, I love the beach, which is why I wanted to come here. The seafood's insane. This particular area of Mexico is very agricultural. So it's very similar to California. It produces a lot of the country's tomatoes and berries and pineapple, mango, papaya, all of my favorite foods. So living here is just a treat. There's never a bad avocado. Also, they're really cheap, but that's just an aside.
All of my avocados are bad, Rick. It's such a bummer.
It's so funny because when I used to shoot video at BA, you would order literally 40 avocados to get that one perfect avocado on camera. Here, you go to the market, they ask you, do you want the avocado for today or tomorrow? That's your choice. And I have never had a bad avocado. You open it and it's just perfect all the time.
Oh, I'm vibrating with jealousy right now. But I'm sincerely so happy for you. And I think it really comes across in Mi Cocina and certainly in Salsa Daddy, also just this beautiful place that you get to live in. I think the community aspect became clear to me when I was reading your tips on how to season and prepare a molcajete. And you talk about bringing it out onto your front porch and grinding up all of this rice and how you should do it on your front porch so that you can meet all of the people and the dogs in your neighborhood. And that just, to me, felt like such an emblematic, maybe experience of what life is like for you.
Oh, 100%. I mean, people are so friendly. They want to talk to you. They stop you on the streets. Actually, and I think my dog is probably like a bigger celebrity than I am here. He has like pretty much on every street, there are people that he goes and visits that are, just like effusive with like pets and hugs and he gives them kisses. So it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, they're like Choco's friends in addition to being your friends. That's his
Exactly.
name,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. So I have to ask, like, do people call you Salsa Daddy? Is that your new mononym?
I haven't gotten the salsa part. I have been called daddy at times, um, in a different context. But yeah, I mean, I think, and that's actually part of the reason why I really like this name. And to be honest, I am really bad with names. Mi Cocina took probably till the very end. Like we were literally about to press print on the book, and I didn't really have a title. And the same was kind of true of Salsa Daddy. And then we were just sort of talking about it and what should it be, and the publisher wanted sort of very clinical, telegraphic names, which frankly were just boring. And I had always seen myself in this book as sort of your salsa Sherpa, like I'm going to guide you through this. And my ultimate wish is for you to have as much fun and experiment and be creative and be passionate and just make salsas that you love eating for yourself and for your family. So, and I think just one day, my agent was just like, well, like, and you're kind of the daddy of salsa. And I was like, oh my God. Yes, I am. And that's kind of how it came to be.
It's such a perfect title. I think it shows like the expertise and the level of care that's being brought across in the book. And it's also just, so fun. It's the opposite of a clinical title. And I think reading the book, I really just got so excited. I would say that I'm somebody who thinks about sauce first when it comes to a meal. And I want like wet food that's like deeply seasoned. And so I think thinking about salsa as the way in made so much sense to me, but it was something that I never really thought about before. And I guess I'm curious, like, how did this idea of a salsa-led cooking book come about, and what do we kind of gain by thinking about salsa as the way to start making a meal?
There are so many specific dishes that I get from certain places, right? So there's a very specific pizza in Austin that I love. It's Conan's. It's a deep dish, Chicago style pizza, and it's got everything on earth on this pizza. But to me, the thing that makes that pizza amazing is the sauce. And I think, as I started thinking about salsas, just generally in my life and in my view of food, so many things that I adore, from a specific restaurant or a specific chef or a specific cookbook, I love them because of the flavor of the sauce that is in it. So whether it's a lasagna or steak au poivre or whatever, or pastel azteca. To me, it's the flavor of the sauce that really, really brings the dish to life. And and I also think that it's true of like taquerias, right? Like there are taquerias that people may not think about it, but I think they probably know this place has the best salsa, right? Or that place has the best guac. And regardless of how mediocre a taco may be, if you have that amazing salsa, it basically just transforms it. And so that was kind of the starting point. And then I really started to think about what is it that salsa does? And there's a line in the book, and it's, maybe it's a little over the top, but I'm over the top. This idea that salsa really catapults the joy of eating. And to me, that's exactly what it does, right? Like you can put a great salsa on a tire and that tire will be delicious as a result. And, people, and not even really just salsas, but like, chocolate sauce, caramel sauce, a hard sauce for bread pudding, a marinara sauce, whatever sauce. Like, it's just the joy of eating and then having sauce, run down your chin or fall on your shirt is okay because you are just so engrossed in that dish and in that moment. And that to me was that was what I wanted to capture with this book, right? I wanted to create salsas that were so incredible you kind of just forget and you're like, oh God, I have salsa on my chin or it's in my beard or whatever. Because eating should be fun, and especially when you're talking about salsa, whether it's you're dipping chips in it or you're loading it onto a taco or drowning a torta or putting it on ice cream. I think it should just be fun.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I completely agree with you that there are so many iconic dishes that really the flavor and the thing that makes it special is coming from the sauce. And when I was reading this book, I loved hearing about the salsas that have been like impactful to you over your own reporting and writing and eating journey. And you talk about this one, like maybe like light bulb salsa moment for you that happened in Mexico City at Taqueria Trompo Imperial. I'm wondering if you could talk about like what this salsa was and why it kind of set things in motion for you.
Oh, so my friend is the owner of that taqueria, and he was formerly was a record executive that then decided he didn't want to, and he was very successful, but then was like, you know what? I'm just a stoner at heart and I want to make really amazing tacos. And so, he, I think that he really just sort of channeled that, like, 2 a.m. stoner, I'm hungry, I need to make food for myself vibe and carried it into his recipes for the restaurant because a lot of the salsas were, and I think a lot of cooks, myself included, are guilty of this, right? You have in your mind like the boundaries, like this is the box that salsa lives in, right? And you can't venture outside this box. So if it's a salsa roja, it's tomatoes, onion, garlic, chilies, whatever. And I think he just was like, there were no constraints. It's like, I'm gonna make whatever I have in the fridge and make it yummy and slather it on this taco. And so one of the salsas was literally just caramelized onions and serranos and salt. And it, like, I was just sort of like, I looked at it and I was like, I've never seen a salsa that looks like this, right? It literally just looked like caramelized onions that had been like chopped up. And I tasted it. And then if you can just imagine like the most insanely delicious French onion soup flavor, right? That deeply caramelized, sweet, but kind of nutty and like umami bomb onions, but then with the hit of this roasted serrano with like a really, really strong bite of heat at the end, it just was insane. And then when you put that on top of a torta or a taco, like it completely changed the flavor of the food, and also like took me out, like, like I've been around the block when it comes to Mexican food, and I've eaten a number of different salsas, and that one, it was so unexpected, and yet so simple but so complex. I was like, I love this, and that's kind of what started, you know, started me thinking like, what else is out there, right? What other salsas exist? What salsas can I make? Kind of, if I can embody the same mentality, where there are no boundaries, there are no limits, you can do whatever you want. Then what else can I create?
Yeah, the salsa universe was unlocked and expanded, I guess.
Exactly.
I love the idea of like a French onion soup feeling salsa. It sounds so good to me. And I want to talk about a little bit about how the book is structured because I think it's really smart. You kind of are talking about these different categories of salsa. How would you kind of like maybe broadly explain the different types of salsa that are kind of compiled together in this book?
So I wanted to show the breadth of salsas. And one of my favorite books is called Six Seasons by Josh McFadden. And actually, funny enough, the way that he structured his book is the reason why I structured Mi Cocina the way it's structured by region. So in Six Seasons, he structured it by time of year. So, and then he each chapter focuses in on what is in season at that moment in time. And I loved that sort of non-conventional way to structure a cookbook. And so I decided to structure Mi Cocina by region. And then I kind of like was trying to figure out like, how do you structure a salsa book, right? Is it by ingredient? Is it by like, usage? Like, what do you put this on? And then what I ended up deciding to do is I looked at it from the point of view of the cook and also their knowledge and their experience. So the chapters are structured so that the easiest salsas, like literally like the 5 to 10 to 15 minute salsas, are in the first 3 chapters. And those are probably more similar to what you might be expecting in terms of method and preparation, but the ingredients are slightly different and also they're easier. And then as we move through the book, then we get into cooked. So it's chapters 1, 2, and 3 are smashed, chopped, and blended salsas. And those are more of the salsas that you would have on your table, the salsa de mesa. So they're more condimenty, they're more the taqueria sort of vibe. They're super easy. The blender salsa is literally you throw everything in a blender and and either pulse it or blend it on medium low, and 5 minutes you've got a salsa. If you have a molcajete, you can smash your salsas or a mortar and pestle or a potato masher, and then chopped. Obviously, that's like your pico de gallos. But even that one, that to me, I think Americans and actually probably quite a few Mexicans believe that guacamole, for example, is a salsa. Pico de gallo is a salsa. And actually, those are categories of salsa. So the pico de gallos are different depending on what region or area of Mexico you're in. And then they chop up whatever is in season, whatever they have, whatever they like. And that becomes a pico de gallo. Guacamoles are salsas made with avocado. So it can be a very thin, pourable, blended salsa that is also technically a guacamole, or it can be something that you might see in a Mexican restaurant in the United States, which is the smashed guacamole with onion, garlic, chile, and then sometimes tomato. But I think then moving further through the book, like we get into the cooked salsas, and those are salsas that you would use for chilaquiles, for enchiladas, pastel azteca. They are components of larger dishes. So like a marinara sauce or an Alfredo sauce, or I'm thinking Italian sauces or French sauces. But then there are a number of sweet salsas, and not necessarily like jams, although like I have a couple of recipes for chocolate sauce and a tequila caramel sauce. But one of the other really amazing salsas that kind of blew my mind in the Yucatan was this habanero jam. And it's incredibly spicy, but then it still has that really nice, deep, rich caramel flavor with caramelized red onions, a little apple cider vinegar, some citrus. And it's just, to me, it just brightens and changes the complexity with that little hit of sugar, a really big, powerful hit of heat, and then acid. It makes your food so much more interesting, and then finally, there were like some special salsas, like the fermented and pickled, which I think are amazing. Like I love a fermented hot sauce. Fermented salsas, just generally, I love fermented anything.
So cool.
And then, like there are lots of pickled veg in Mexico, and then sort of like the special section, which I didn't really know how to classify this exactly, because, there's some salsas that are like kind of dairy forward. Then obviously you have the salsa machas, which are oil based. And then finally, like to kind of wrap it up, and I hadn't planned on doing this originally, but as I was cooking through the book, I got to a point where, as you would imagine, like at the end of the week, I literally would have 8 quarts of salsa in my refrigerator. And my neighbors were like, please do not bring us any more salsa. My freezer was full. I was like, I can't throw this away, right? And I have to figure out something to do with it. And so I was just like, like I would make meatballs and then, simmer the meatballs in the sauce. I would make meatloaf. I would use it as a glaze for fish or as a barbecue sauce for chicken. I was using it to make rice and pasta and soups. And then the more I kept doing this, like after about a month of doing this, I was like, you know what? Like I should actually incorporate this into the book. And then I was like, okay, I think to make it really useful, there should be, about 25 easy weeknight recipes that you can either pair with the salsas in the front of the book or use that leftover salsa to make this other dish. And so that's kind of how that last chapter was born. And I'm really glad it's there because writing this book has actually changed the way that I cook and think about food, because salsa is like such an amazing cook's helper, right? Like if you have even a cup of salsa in your freezer, you thaw it out and you add 3 cups of water and now you have, a really flavorful veggie broth. Or you have a base to braise a chicken or bake a chicken or baste a cut of meat. And it's just, to me, it's like very, very valuable. And so I really like that last chapter a lot, and I'm glad it's there.
Yeah, I mean, all of the chapters I think are so compelling in different ways. The sweet salsas section really speaks to me. And then I think this last chapter, which you call comida fácil, like easy meals, like I think it really shows your background in food media, because I think people always talk about how you can have a leg up on cooking for the week. And if you're right, if you have salsa, you've basically just made this flavor shortcut that you can use to make life easier for yourself in some kind of way.
Totally. Yeah. And I mean, and the credit to the New York Times, like I've been doing easy weeknight recipes for them for the last several years. And that was really, really good training. Because I think, particularly when I was at BA, I think that there was a mentality amongst all of us that it's like, the harder, the more complicated, the more unknown an ingredient, the better. And I think that was where we were at, then, which was a long time ago. But I think now, people want simplicity and they want, easy food. They don't want to go shopping. They don't want the crazy ingredient, or certainly not the expensive one either. And so that helped me a lot to sort of rethink cooking for that audience that needs to get dinner on the table for the family in, 30 minutes or less with what I have in my pantry, not making a special trip to the store. And so that was a big part of that chapter as well.
Yeah, also it really empowers the reader to make a bunch of different salsa and not be worried about, especially if like you're having people over for a party, you want to make a salsa trio. I think that would be so fun. And let's say like people don't eat all of it, then you don't just have to eat it with chips. You can just use it to kind of help yourself for the rest of the week.
100%.
I want to talk a little bit about like some of the core salsa ingredients, which are obviously chiles. I think one of my favorite food facts that I talk to people about is how like fresh and dried chiles sometimes start out as the same thing, but we give them different names. So like a jalapeno is a chipotle, just that the chipotle has been smoked and dried, or the same with like a poblano and an ancho. And I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit about what kind of happens with the flavor of a chili pepper when it's getting smoked and dried, and like how both fresh and dried chilies kind of can come together to make all of these different delicious salsa.
Yeah, so I think probably one of the most important parts of this and why the flavors are so different, right? I think you might expect that the flavor of the fresh thing would at least have some relation to the the dry thing. And they are related, but there's a big difference. So for anchos, for example, or poblanos, right? So we buy poblanos when they're green,
Mm-hmm.
and they have a very sort of vegetal, grassy sharpness to them. Sometimes they're a little bit, or they can be a little spicy, but generally they're pretty mild. They don't have a lot of sweetness. We roast them to kind of bring out some of those, like those deep sugars.
Mm-hmm.
But that's that flavor profile. Now, for the anchos, they actually let the poblanos mature on the plant. So they turn red. And so just like any fruit, as they mature, the sugars and the flavors start to develop more. So think about eating a green tomato versus a red tomato, or a green peach or plum versus a ripe peach or plum. So with all of that sugar and all of that developed flavor, then they dry it. And then, to me, the flavor of a good chili ancho is much more like dried fruit. It's soft. It should be, it should have or it kind of that sugary, almost syrupy feel and texture. And so you get less of those vegetal notes, and it becomes a little bit more nutty, a little bit more fruity, a little bit more floral. It actually has a much stronger pungent aroma than a green poblano. And for the most part, like, there are a few chilies that are dried when they're green, that then become black, like a pasilla. But for the most part, the dried chilies are generally dried when they're fully ripe. And so same thing with a chipotle. A green jalapeno can have like a very, very sharp, grassy, vegetal, herbaceous flavor with a decent amount of heat. But then when you let it ripen, it becomes much sweeter. It becomes you start to get like flavors of a red bell pepper. It's a little bit more rounded, a little bit more balanced in flavor. You still have that heat, and then when you dry it and then you concentrate the flavor, you remove the water, and then you add the smoke element to it. To me, like, that's when a lot of really amazing magic happens, because you're adding a little bit more depth to the caramel. You're adding that smoke, and a lot of times, at least in Mexico, northern Mexico, which is where a lot of the chipotles are produced, even for the United States, they're smoked over mesquite. And so you're actually getting that flavor of the mesquite in whatever it is you're cooking. And it's a really great addition to me to use in barbecue sauces, particularly if you don't have access to, or the weather is not great, and you want to bring sort of like that outdoor barbecue flavor into a bleak, winter's day. You can actually use chipotles to help do that. So I love, and actually just a note on the chipotles. So there's more, but like there's two basic styles of the chipotle. So the one is the chipotle, and the other is called morita. The chipotle, the actual, like, in the U.S., unfortunately, we just generalize and call everything chipotle. The chipotle in Mexico, the chipotle meco, looks like tobacco. Like, it's really got a leathery skin, and it's really smoked. It's the mature jalapeno, but it's the first crop that's picked off of the jalapeno plant. And so they get very large. They can get up to like 6 to 8 inches long, almost the size of a poblano. And then they're smoked, I think, at time, like between like 10 to 48 hours. So there's like very little moisture, and it's like super smoky. So, and those, I think you have to be really careful if you use them, because they're just super, super intense. What most people are used to are what are called moritas here, which is the second or third crop of jalapenos that are grown on the plant. Those are much smaller, they're much sweeter, and they're only smoked for a couple of hours. so the smoke is less intense. You get more of the actual chili flavor. They're not completely dehydrated. There's still some of those fruity notes, but in addition to a little bit of the smoke. And so those you can either find dried or then they're canned in the adobo, which I also love, by the way, as a cook's help, cook's cheat.
Yeah, I have some in my freezer, which is always like such a nice thing to do when I'm making a soup. I love talking about this like kaleidoscope of chilies that are out there. I think like another big factor of variation when you're making salsa that you talk about in the book, and we talked about a little bit, is the tools that you're using. And, you can use a blender, you can use molcajete. I'm wondering if you have a favorite tool for making salsa these days, or if you find that like there's different moments for each of them.
I mean, honestly, I think it's just, to me, it's the blender. I mean, it's the easiest thing. And if you go to any taqueria or restaurant in this country, and by this country, I mean Mexico, you will see the blender, right? There is a blender very few people are using a molcajete in like a commercial or a professional situation, right? They're
pain.
great, and I have many of them, but if I need salsa now, I don't need it, 15 minutes from now. I need it like right now. And so it's just easier to throw everything in the blender. So that I think is probably like my essential equipment. And you don't need, I have a Vitamix. You don't need a Vitamix. I've made salsa I have a bullet. Bullets work just great. So I don't think you need like a crazy, mega blender. Most people here seem to have the very inexpensive Oster, like the $20, $19.99 at Target Oster blender. Those are perfectly fine. Like, and honestly, you're not trying to make a smooth puree or a soup. You want some of those chunks. So like even an old blender with dull blades is going to give you a very, very nice salsa texture. But like I generally, if I'm making guacamole, like I always use the molcajete. And there are a few other occasions that I use it, but it's mainly for nostalgia. Like I have very strong memories of my mom using her molcajete, and that the sound of the stones clicking each other as she's grinding the spices. I just feel like I feel very connected to her and to my past when I use it. Also, and I wrote this in the book, the molcajete that I use most often, or pretty much exclusively, is the one my grandfather gave me. So now that one's like, oh my God, 30 years old. And it's a connection to the past, and and it's still with me. And so I use it for those reasons more than actually the utility of making a salsa. But I also think that, when I do, I feel like the salsa tastes slightly better, even though it probably tastes the same as if I put it in the blender. I would not make a smashed guacamole in a blender.
Yeah.
I have made other, like, more of the pourable guacamoles. I will definitely put in the blender. So like with tomatillos and other fresh chiles, I would put that in the blender. But yeah.
Yeah, I think I love you talking about the kind of personal connection and the pageantry of using a molcajete. And I also loved reading about when you were using your mom's and it finally expired. If you want to maybe tell that story, I thought it was so funny and sweet.
Oh my God. It was like literally horrifying for me. I think I was probably like 17, 18, and my aunts were visiting, one from Georgia, one from San Antonio. And we were making a big dinner, and my mom had given me her molcajete, which was pretty small. Like I would say maybe it probably a 2-cup capacity. And she had gotten that molcajete when she got married. I think that she had just bought it. Like, I don't think it was given to her. I think she just bought it. But she pretty much used that thing, I would say, almost every day for, whatever. At that point, probably she had like, it was like 30, maybe 40 years old. So, after it's volcanic rock, and when you get them, they're generally like an inch to an inch and a half or 2 inches thick. So it takes a while to wear it down, but over time, if you use it a lot, you will wear the rock down, and hers had become thin on the bottom. And so she had given me, like, I don't know, like 2 cups of cumin seeds to grind up. And cumin seeds are kind of hard, and so you kind of have to hit them with the rock and against the molcajete. So I started doing that, and as I was tapping, literally like one tap just split the thing in half, and it had 3 little legs, and it split down the middle, and it literally just opened up like as if I had cut an onion in half, and like the 2 halves just like fell on either side. And I'm staring at it in disbelief because, in my mind, this is like completely indestructible. But then it all of a sudden hit me like I broke my mother's molcajete. And I literally, I just started to cry. Like I was like, this is the most heartbreaking, horrific thing that a son could ever do to his mom, like break her molcajete. And she literally looked at me like as if nothing had happened, and then reached down, opened up a cupboard, and pulled out another one as if it was like, a box of tissue or something, right? It's just like, oh, here's another one. And just, swapped it out. And I was like, wait, what? Like, I'm so confused. Like, you had this other one, and then, and so that was that. That was the end of that molcajete. And I mean, I obviously, to this day, I'm deeply troubled by that event, but she was completely unfazed by it. So
she knew it was going to break at some point. So she had the other one on deck, and then she put you in the position of having it happen.
Yeah, I was the guinea pig.
I mean, I think it's such a good story because it speaks to the huge importance that this can carry as this tool that your mom was using all of the time. And then at the same point, it's just an appliance. You can always get another one, and the food is still going to taste just as good.
Yeah. And I think just to that point, I think it's so, I get so many comments and DMs from people about this topic, about cooking either with your, aging parents or grandmother, aunts, uncles, whatever, or cooking with your children. And, I think both are incredibly important. And I think that, whether it's salsa or Mexican food or something else, it doesn't really matter. But I think, my most powerful, fondest, deepest, most precious memories revolve around cooking with my family and my friends. And, I think it's so important to do that. I think it's so important to do that with the people that you love, whether they're old or young. And also, I think it's important to capture those memories. Now we live in an age where you can easily, make a video of that. And my mother passed away 14 years ago, and her last Thanksgiving, I was there, and I told her, I'm going to record you making Thanksgiving dinner. And she was like, no, I don't do this. And she didn't want to be on camera, but I was like, I'm not asking. I'm just saying that this is what I'm going to do. And she wasn't sick or anything. I just was like, I'm going to record this so that I have this. And I know how you make what you make. And I had no idea that was going to be the last one. But, I made a point of recording everything and writing down everything that she did, so that I would have it. And then as it turned out, that was the last time that, she made Thanksgiving dinner. And I am so incredibly grateful that I have those videos, because not only so that I can replicate that food, but more importantly, she's talking directly to me. Sorry, I'm getting choked up now, but to have her looking at me and telling me, what she's doing step by step, so incredibly valuable, so incredibly meaningful. And I just think that everybody should do that to preserve those memories, and also to preserve those recipes, because that, in the end, that's that's all you're going to be left with, or that is one thing that you will be left with. And it's a really great way to keep their memory alive. And I also think that that's why it's a good idea to cook with your children too, because obviously, she ingrained that in me. I was probably 3 when I started cooking with her. She would pick me up from daycare, and I would take a chair from the dining room and drag it into the kitchen, and I would just stand there. She would go and change after work, and then she would come to the kitchen, and there I was, just like ready to stir a pot or do whatever she asked me to do. So I think it's a very important and meaningful thing to do and to pass on.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I really appreciate you, sharing that memory with us and a little bit of your mom. And even in this book, you have, I really love this. Like in the very first chapter, you have 2 like salsa de mesa, which are kind of like the salsa on the table that you would eat with things. And one of them is your mom's salsa de mesa, which is like tomato red salsa, and then the other one is your dad's, which is pure jalapeno, which is such a crazy move, but I feel like it's such a fun insight into both of your parents and like the kind of sort of everyday salsa that they would have out.
Yeah, my mom, it's funny because like when I was little, like we ate Mexican food, but they ate incredibly spicy salsas. My father in particular, but my mom definitely did too. And they were they were the kind of people that so we had a garden, and they grew jalapenos and tomatoes and cilantro and Mexican oregano, and because we lived in Texas, like we had produce probably 8 or 9 months out of the year. And also, like, they grew a lot of chili piquin. They grew wild in the yard, like, and I think a lot of the birds propagated them as well. But in the spring and summer, she was using fresh ingredients, and so she would go and pick the chili piquin. Sometimes she used green, sometimes she used red. It was really all about like the season, right? Um and I remember her making them like because I couldn't eat things that hot when I was that little. I kind of didn't pay attention. I just knew that the salsa was always there. And when and even beyond the salsa, like there were times where they would just like pick jalapenos off the plants, and they would eat them like as a like they would take a bite of food and then take a bite of jalapeno, like just raw.
Wow.
And yeah. And like it didn't seem odd to me at the time. I just knew that I couldn't do that, right? And then it wasn't until later in high school that I really started eating salsa and had an appreciation for it. And then I started to, like my mom had this like one little silver saucepan, and she used it. Like sometimes she would boil her ingredients. Sometimes she would use fresh. The winter time she used canned whole tomatoes. She always had like in the wintertime she would dry the chili piquin. So she'd pick them when they were red in the fall. And then whenever like first freeze was coming, she would just like lay them out on a sheet tray and let them dry, like either in the laundry room or in the garage. So there was like always like the ingredients for salsa were always there. Like there was never a time when there wasn't a can of whole tomatoes. And it's not like she did that was the only thing she used it for. Like we ate spaghetti and meatballs and that kind of stuff too. But like there was always salsa ready in the fridge, and there was always the ingredients that you needed to make it available. And I just remember, and I wrote about this as well a little bit, but like when I was in high school and in college, we, my friends and I might have thrown a few parties and maybe consumed a little bit too much. And my mother made the most amazing breakfast, and all my friends loved her breakfast. Like they would literally like invite themselves over. So we would be completely hungover, and they're like, "We're going to your mom's house, right? Like she's gonna make us breakfast, right?" And so I'd like, call my mom, like, can these people come over and can you make breakfast? And, like, it was like chorizo. She would make her own chorizo. She would fry potatoes. She made the most amazingly beautiful scrambled eggs. Like they were the most perfect scrambled eggs I've ever had in my entire life. And sometimes she would make tortillas. And then there was always salsa, right? And it was just like, you're hungover, you're drinking, hot coffee and then just slathering this salsa over everything, the chorizo, the beans, the eggs, the fried potatoes. And it was just glorious, And I think that's really when I started to really appreciate salsa, not only through my eyes, but the eyes of my friends who were just like, that was nothing that they would get at home. Right. And then at that time, like, there weren't that many brands of jarred salsa either. It was like paste picante sauce, and that kind of stuff. And which was, obviously nothing like what my mom made. So, and then my dad, that jalapeno salsa, it was just like hilarious. Like whereas my mom, always made sure she had the ingredients for salsa, within arm's reach. My father, is like, okay, I need salsa. Oh, but I don't have anything but, these jalapenos and a Costco sized drum of garlic powder. Well, that's what I'm going to use. And I'm just like, are you insane? Like, what? Also, like, why couldn't you just go to the store and get other ingredients? Anyway, that's what is going on in my mind. And I distinctly remember, like, he made these. My father makes the most amazing breakfast tacos, and that was kind of his job when we were growing up. My mom always made dinner and breakfast on the weekends. And we ate, like, for the 20 years that I lived at home, like, we always ate a hot meal at like 6:00. That was her thing. My father, his job was breakfast. So my mom left early. She was a nurse, so she had to go to the hospital early to work. So my dad would wake up me and my brother, and usually the night before, he would ask us, what do we want to eat? And he would make some really, pretty elaborate breakfasts, like they're, French toast, pancakes, breakfast tacos. And so anyway, as he got older, like his breakfast tacos were just like the shit, like insane. So whenever I go home, I'm always like, Dad, I mean, he knows what to do. So he makes the breakfast tacos, and then I'm like, okay, where's the salsa? And he pulls out this jar. He's like, watch out. It's like, this one's like really hot. And I'm like, it's kind of a weird, suspicious looking color. Like it's all green. And he's like, yeah, it's all jalapeno. And I'm like, wait. Is that a figurative statement? Like it's mostly jalapeno? Or like, and he's like, no, it's pretty much all jalapeno. And I'm like, I still don't quite understand this. And he's like, okay, it's literally jalapeno and garlic powder. And I was like, what the hell kind of salsa is this? I'm like, I don't understand you, old man. But okay, fine. It's, whatever. My tacos are getting cold. I'm going to eat them. And I was like, holy shit, this is so good. And so that's really why it's in the book. Because it's like, because I think this is a really good example of, right, in my mind, I had that, that little box of salsa is this plus this plus this plus this. And my dad is just like, whatever, like I don't have those things. And so I need some heat for my food. And this is what I'm going to make because that's what I have. And I was like, wow, again, like another breakthrough moment for me. And when you approach making salsa with that mindset, like anything's possible. There's a recipe for a cucumber based salsa. And that was the same thing. I had this random cucumber that I hadn't used, and I didn't want it to go bad. And I was like, I want to know if I can make a good cucumber salsa. And I did. And I was like, wow, that's cool. There's another one. This is a really fun one. So growing up, my father had peach trees and pecan trees. So we would harvest, amazing peaches in the summertime. And then in the fall, right before Thanksgiving, we would harvest fresh pecans, and my mom would make pralines and pecan pie. And so that's like those are very strong memories with me. And so I was like, I want to make a pecan and peach salsa as an homage to that, that piece of my Texas history. And I was like, either this is going to be really delicious or really horrible. And I couldn't really work out in my mind how it was going to turn out. But I'm like, I'm going to just do it. I mean, whatever, and it's one of my favorite salsas in the book. Like, I grilled the peaches, I toasted the pecans. It's got a little bit of citrus and habanero, and it is just like, it's not. There's like sweetness from the peaches, but then you get acidity plus the citrus, and then the pecans just add this like really toasty, nutty depth. It pairs so well with like carnitas or grilled meats, or you could put it on a steak. It would make an amazing steak sandwich. You could mix it in with a little bit of mayonnaise and have like this ridiculous, like, sandwich topping. It's, and I think for me, that's part of the appeal of this book, and also just salsas generally. Like, it's a pretty low investment and low lift, right? Some recipes, if you make them, they're really expensive and they're time consuming. And so if you don't like the finished product, you've now wasted, a lot of time and a lot of money. With salsas, and I've noticed this here in Mexico, a lot of younger people will bring salsas because you don't have to spend a lot of money. It doesn't take a lot of time. You don't have to be a really good cook, and you can be like wildly creative and no one's going to criticize you for it. And then sometimes you just make something that everybody like freaks out over and loves. Yeah. And I wanted to adopt that mindset, and I want home cooks in the US who buy this book to adopt that mindset and just be fearless in the kitchen and take whatever rules that exist in your mind about salsa, just throw them away and have fun.
That's like the perfect tagline for the book. And it's funny that you mentioned that peach pecan salsa, because that's the first thing that I bookmarked in the book as like, I need to make this immediately. It just sounds so special and so exciting. I want to play a little like rapid fire game with you to close today. I'm going to make you play some favorites, but it's going to be fine, I promise. Tomatoes or tomatillos?
Oh my God. Okay. So tomatillos when tomatoes are not in season, but then tomatoes when they're in season.
Okay, that's fair. Flour or corn tortillas?
I'll probably get hate mail for this, but, I grew up with flour tortillas. I grew up with my mom's homemade flour tortillas, so that kind of like biased me for the rest of my life.
Yeah, that's your trump card. I don't think anyone can come for you.
Yeah.
Your favorite fresh chile?
Oh God, so hard.
You can do
I
two.
love habaneros. Okay, well, so the one that I use most often is serrano. I love that flavor, and it's just such a good flavor for so many salsas. But I love the fruitiness of an habanero. But I don't use them quite as often. But I love that flavor.
Okay, and then your two favorite dried chiles?
Ooh. The one that I use most often is guajillo, and I just think it's like a really great all-purpose dried chile, and I think it's widely accessible to all home cooks in the U.S. The one that I probably love the most, and it's really, really hard to find, even for me, it's only grown in Oaxaca. It's called chilhuacle, and there are a number of different varieties. There's like a black one, a red one, and a yellow one. I love all three of them. The yellow chilhuacle is so good. I use it in a recipe in the book, even though I knew that most people would not be able to find it. But it's just, if you ever see it, you should just buy it. It's like, it's fruity, it's bright, it's got like such a unique flavor, and then that color is just really, really stunning. It's used to make moles. I used it for one of my salsa machas. I really love that a lot.
Ooh, okay. I'm going to seek this out the next time I'm in Oaxaca. It's called chilhuacle?
Chilhuacle.
Chilhuacle. Okay. A lesser known salsa that you think should reach widespread ubiquity, like on salsa bars?
So it's probably lesser known in the US. Like, I think it's probably more common here. It doesn't exist at a lot of taquerias, but I think it's a really interesting technique. So basically, you can make you can like fry up chilies and onions, like a lot of them, and then just like blend them like on high with the oil that you cook them in, and you get almost this like mayonnaise like texture. Like it's really light and creamy, and you can use a ton of chiles, and because of the oil and the air, it doesn't read as super hot. And I mean, just imagine like caramelized onion, garlic, chiles, but as an aioli, right? And then, you can use a little bit more oil and it's more of like a pourable sitch, or you can use, you can blend it really hard and then it gets like really sort of like mayo consistency. So it's spreadable. I think it's a really, really good salsa to have and to use and to make.
That sounds super cool. What's it called?
I mean, usually just people, there's really not a name for that style.
Yeah.
It's usually just like something cremosa, right? So it's like
Creamy.
salsa habanero de, cremosa. And usually the creaminess is because it's got the oil in it. If it's got crema in it, it's usually con crema instead of like creamy. So with cream versus creamy.
Yeah. I love the like salsa aioli descriptor. It just sets off so many light bulbs in my head.
Oh, they're so good. Highly recommend.
Okay, my final question is your favorite drink to like turn down the heat when you're eating something that's maybe a little too spicy.
So it's kind of like the drink that I order like always whenever I go to any taqueria. It's called limonada. It's basically like a Mexican lemonade, but I like mine with Topo Chico. So it's like key limes, like lots of key limes. So when I make it at home, which I actually do quite often, it's like five or six key limes, Topo Chico, ice, and then simple syrup to taste. And it's delicious.
Wow, I can't wait to make that at home to pair with all of the salsas that I'm going to make. Rick, this has been so much fun. Thank you for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Emma Christensen, this is Taste. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
It's so fun to get to chat about your great new book. And I guess to start, I'm wondering if you could tell me like what draws you to the world of drinks as a writer and editor.
Oh, my goodness. Well, aside from just I love drinks and I enjoy a nice beverage, I also just love the challenge of making these things myself at home. Like there was a time in my life when, I had these friends and they invited me over. They're like, we're doing a brew day. And I was like, what are you talking about? Went over, watched them do a brew day. They were brewing a big 5-gallon batch of beer. This was like 15 years ago, and I was just hooked ever since. Like anything homebrewed, I'm there.
Would you say that you're like a science person?
I would say I just love to know things. I love to understand how things work and how they come to be. So if that makes me a science-minded person, then yes.
Yeah, I guess I'm wondering if I have to have been good at chemistry in high school to make my own drinks at home.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. You just need to come with a curious mind and a experimental mindset and a love of learning the process, and you are good to go.
Okay, I think I can do all of those things. And I guess have like a good guidebook to help on the journey.
And that helps. That helps. You know, I've written one here for you.
Yeah, so I want to talk about it. The book is called Hard Seltzer, Iced Tea, Kombucha, and Cider. Why group all of those different kinds of drinks together?
Well, except for the cider, I've done one other book that was all about hard cider. Except for that one, none of them were things that I had done before. And so that was appealing just for me personally. But then kind of for the broader world, these are all drinks that have become really popular in the last, like five or so years. And I just felt like the people need to know that you can make it yourself if you want to.
Yeah, I want to dig into this like motivation a little bit. I think, at least for myself living in New York, every time I go to the grocery store or the bodega, it feels like there's twice as many drinks in the refrigerated aisle as there were before. In this moment when there are so many things that we can buy in the store, like how would you kind of pitch the case for making your own drinks at home?
Well, one, it's super fun. It's just a fun experiment. It's a fun thing to do at home. It doesn't take up a lot of space. You don't need a lot of fancy ingredients. Like, it's just a cool hobby to have. But besides that, when you make things yourself, you can make whatever you want. You can make whatever flavors you want. You have access to the entire grocery store of spices, of juices, of fresh fruits, of seasonal things. Like it's like only limited by your imagination. So if you have kind of always wondered like, what would it be like if I combined this cherry seltzer with a ginger beer soda? Like, you can make that. So yeah, I think just like exploring the possibilities of where you could take this is why I think people should do it themselves.
Yeah, I think that totally makes sense. And I know, at least for myself, like when I had my kombucha brewing phase at home, I felt so empowered that I knew how to make this thing that I loved to drink so much. And also, like, I think, I would maybe buy myself kombucha as a treat like once or twice a week, but I wouldn't buy it every day because that's just kind of crazy. But, once I was making it at home, like I always had access to this thing that I liked. And I think that is kind of special as well.
Totally. And you do, I mean, it's not like a huge money saving adventure because you
need all the equipment.
Like the equipment is an upfront cost and then you can use it forever. Like, I'm literally still using the same set of equipment that I bought 15 years ago when I started doing this. But there is some cost savings there. Like, I think I do 1 gallon batches and you usually get about 10-ish bottles out of that, 12-ounce bottles. And it depends on what you're making, but like a batch of seltzer is basically just you're making fermented water and then adding either juice or spices or fruit to it. That comes out to, like, actually, you might save a lot. I haven't done the math on this, but you might save a good amount of money. That would be like $5 to make a big batch. Mm-hmm. And it's now like $10 to $12 to buy a 6-pack at the store. It's getting expensive. So yeah, go save money.
Yeah, I'm so curious what your fridge situation is like. I feel like it must be so full of drinks.
We just moved into a house situation with an actual garage, and the former owners left behind a fridge, which is in the garage. And so the garage is my fridge. That's where I keep all of my various experiments and bottles. And I'm like, what do I feel like tonight? Let's go out to the garage fridge and see what we got. But yeah, when I was working on the hard seltzer book, my kitchen was like a mad scientist laboratory. Like, I had a whole section of the counter that was just fermenters. I have when I do these cookbooks, I have 6 to 8 fermenters going at once. And these are little 1 gallon guys. So I just line them up on my counter and you walk in and you see these bubbling, burbling experiments on my counter.
I love that you have a second fridge in the garage. I feel like if anybody deserves that, it's you.
That is not how everyone, not everyone has that. So I feel very lucky. But most of the time, you don't need to actually store everything in the fridge. Like, you only need to store things in the fridge if you're going to be drinking it soon. But once you bottle these things, they're stable for a long time, and you can just stash them in a cupboard or in a closet or behind the bookshelf or wherever you want to put them.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I guess I want to dig into your developer brain and what it was like for you to work on this book. Did you feel like you had a certain perspective in terms of I really want these flavors or these variations on these drinks? Or how did you kind of decide what your version of the hard seltzer, the iced tea, the kombucha, and the cider would be?
Mm-hmm. I approached this book and all of my books very much from a teaching mindset. So my goal is to really give you guys here on this podcast, as well as everyone listening, to give you guys the skills and the tools to make any of these beverages and to make anything you want to make. So I really thought through like starting with the basics, starting with how fermentation works. What is the equipment you need? What is the basic ingredients that you should have on hand? And then each chapter, the hard seltzer, the iced tea, the kombucha, and the ciders, starts with a base recipe, so that you can use that to do whatever, to add any flavorings or any ingredients that you want to, but it's like that's the template recipe.
Mm-hmm.
And then through the chapter, they start with like the easiest recipes. Like the hard seltzer chapter starts with a lemon hard seltzer, which is just like you make a fermented water basically, and then you just add lemon, and you get a gorgeous lemon seltzer. And then it goes all the way through to the harder things. So toward the end of the chapter are the more like nuanced things, or the things that have more ingredients, or they're just a little more complicated. So you could really, if you wanted to, you could start small and then work your way up. Or if you just want to like dive into gin and tonic hard seltzer from day one, like you could absolutely do that.
I like that. It sounds like it's a kind of book that can really grow with you as your own kind of like ambitions and ideas for making drinks do as well.
Totally. That is 100% my goal.
I'm curious if you could talk about like maybe a recipe that was the trickiest to perfect for the book. I'm always curious about like how things kind of evolve and come together.
Yeah, I would say the kombucha chapter, or like developing that base kombucha recipe, that was tricky. And full disclosure, the kombuchas are probably the trickiest ones to make at home. Everything else is pretty straightforward. And the kombucha is pretty straightforward once you wrap your head around it. But basically, you have to make a batch of regular, everyday kombucha, like the kind that you were making. You have to make it so that you're making that daily kombucha, or that week, the regular everyday kombucha, that you're making it on a regular enough cadence that the SCOBY is really strong, that you're getting a nice fermentation in there. And then once you've made that basic everyday non-alcoholic kombucha, then that becomes your base for making the alcoholic kombucha. So it's a little more time. It's a little more tricky. Kombucha by its nature, because you're working with these wild yeasts and, the SCOBY, which is kind of like a weird thing that you have to get to know because it's kind of a living creature. Just by the nature of kombucha, it tends to be a little more, I don't want to say challenging, but you need to go in with a little bit of a learner's mindset with that one.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Does your SCOBY have a name?
I've never named it. I probably should.
I don't know. I feel like when I ultimately, I don't know if I'd say I killed my SCOBY as much as decided that it was time for us to move on, but I had named her and it did make me feel worse about it. So
hold a little funeral, thank her for her service.
Yeah.
She can go on her way.
Yeah, maybe I'll do like the 2.0 version after reading this book. And then on the flip side, is there a recipe that, maybe surprised you in terms of like it was more unexpectedly delicious than you thought it would be, or it was actually easier than you thought the process would be?
Gosh. So many, honestly. Well, the two that really stand out to me that I was like, wow, this is really, really tasty, is the Hurricane Hard Cider, which is based on just kind of a nod to the Hurricane cocktail from New Orleans. And that was a total experiment. I wanted to kind of experiment with these cocktail-inspired and tiki bar-inspired drinks in the book. And so that was a total experiment. And like the first time I made it, I was like, this is delicious. No notes, done. Like it was so good, and it was pretty. And then in the seltzer chapter, the pineapple hard seltzer was just like, I could just drink that every single day. Like it's so tasty and delicious. And then overall, to the easiest recipes in the book, the seltzers ended up being surprisingly easy. Like at first I was like, gosh, I don't know. Can you even make hard seltzer at home? Like, I know it's possible. I know I've heard people do it, but like, is it worth it? And then like, once I started doing it, I was like, oh, this is super cool. Because like I've said a couple times now, I think you basically you're fermenting water, and you're making hard water, which if you want to drink that is by all means, go for it. And then you're just adding flavor to it. And it's so easy. You can make a batch in just a couple weeks. And I was amazed. I was surprised.
When you say hard water, is that like the same thing as moonshine essentially, or what's the difference?
Moonshine is distilled. So moonshine becomes like like gin or whiskey.
Uh-huh.
It's a more, you're like taking the booze kind of out of the liquid and what's the word I'm looking for? I'm making a gesture with my hand that none of you can see. You're distilling it. You're just making it more concentrated. Whereas making hard water, basically you're taking a gallon of water, you're adding sugar to it, you sprinkle on some brewing yeast, and the yeast eats the sugar, and that makes alcohol. So you're left with this more or less flavorless water that is alcoholic, that has booze in it. And then from there, if you wanted to just make like plain hard seltzer, you could just make it fizzy and drink it that way, or you can just add fruit or juice or any flavorings you want to that.
Yeah, I know that like you're not making this for the apocalypse, but it does make me think that you would be a really good person to have in that situation, because
this has been my pitch to several like neighborhood groups, friend groups. I'm like, hey, you want me on your team in the apocalypse? Like, I'm going to bring the booze.
It's very important. I read a whole article about doomsday preppers and like the kinds of things that they keep in their bunkers. And one of it is like airplane travel size alcohol bottles so that they can trade with people for other things. So you can be trading hard seltzer for other things that you need.
I can and I will if that day comes.
So this book has a lot of great information about the kind of materials and supplies that homebrewers need. And you strike me as a very organized person. So I'm curious how you kind of tracked your ferments that you were working on, how you wanted to adapt things differently. Should people have a kind of like journal where they can be tracking where things are at in the right stage and how they want to tweak things for the next time?
Mm-hmm. This is a total choose your own adventure hobby. Like, you can get as intense and detailed and nerdy about it as you want to, which is my side of the spectrum, or you can have more of a chaos approach and just go into the kitchen one day and be like, I want to make this recipe, and boom, you make it. Personally, I use Google spreadsheets, and I keep everything in there. I track like, okay, what recipe is it? What day did I start it? What day did I add the fruit? What day did I bottle it? What were my tasting notes? Like, I keep track of all of that stuff. And then, yeah, when I was developing the book, if it wasn't quite right, then I would do version 2 of the pineapple seltzer or whatever it was. So I love Google Sheets. That's like that speaks my language. I know a lot of other people out there do the same, like people who are nerdy like me. There are some like apps that you can use to both like store recipes and keep track of your brew days or your fermentations that you're doing. They're more geared toward beer brewing and mead making and cider, like that kind of side of things. So, but I'm sure you could adapt them to doing any kind of ferment that you wanted to do. Or yeah, just keep an old-fashioned pen and paper journal. That works too.
I think I had like a sticky note on my kombucha jar that I would write, like I would check off if I had like, fed it or taken off the SCOBY or done whatever I needed to do that day. And it worked pretty well, honestly.
Yeah, that's smart. I use a lot of painter's tape. I just like write like the day or like, don't forget to add the blah, blah, blah spice or whatever. Like, I'll just like stick those right on the jar where I'm fermenting things.
I love that. I mean, we're talking a lot about like home brewing and drinks today, but I know that like in your own professional career, you're at Simply Recipes, you were an editor at The Kitchen previously. I'm curious if you think that home brewing, like this side of your brain, is the same as when you're cooking and like developing those kinds of recipes, or if you think that they're kind of like separate practices.
Oh, that is a good question. I think there's a lot of the same skills that go into it, that go into developing like a chickpea recipe for dinner and then developing a hard cider recipe. It's all about like, for me, I've been doing this for years and years and years. And so I can almost like taste what I want in my mouth. I'm like, okay, I want to make a pineapple hard seltzer. This is kind of what I want it to taste like. I think I'm going to need fresh pineapple, or I'm going to try fresh pineapple, and then I'll also try juice. And then my brain starts like thinking about like, oh, am I going to need some lemon in there to bump up the citrusy flavor? Or maybe I'll use lemon peel instead of lemon. Like that, that's where my like thoughts start going. And then I start writing it all down, and I make like my notes about like, don't forget to try juice and fresh pineapple in there. I'll kind of work it out that way. So I guess this is a long way of saying like, yeah, I think it is kind of the same process. I think the only difference with fermentation is that it's a longer process. Like it basically takes, you do a week for the primary fermentation, which is literally just the yeast eating the sugar. And then you add the whatever flavorings you want to add. On that, you let sit for at least another week, or you could go a week or two on that. Then you bottle it. It needs to sit in the bottle for another week. So within like 3 to 4 weeks, basically, you have your finished batch ready to drink. Whereas when I'm developing a recipe, that's like, one night and we'll have that for dinner. I guess because it's a longer process, if I do want to tweak it, like if I make this whole batch of pineapple hard seltzer and then I get to the end and I'm like, oh man, that's just like not quite what I had in mind, then I have to start it all again and think about it, think it through again. Whereas like if I'm developing a chickpea recipe for dinner, I could start working on that in the morning and make it 5 times before dinner and then have my recipe done. So there is some like just how you think about your time with that. And just having a more experimental attitude toward it, because fermentation is, we try to control every factor that you can to make it as reliable and as repeatable as you possibly can. But it's yeast, and yeast sometimes just does what it wants to do. And so you kind of have to just like respect the yeast's choices and just go with it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think to me it feels more similar to baking than cooking in some way, and that you have the yeast and you have maybe like you can't intervene at a certain point in the same way that if you're cooking something on the stove, you can kind of take it off the heat or something like that.
Yes, that is correct. Yeah.
So I guess as someone who thinks a lot about drinks, do you buy into the whole drink of the summer thing? Do you have any predictions for what people might want to be drinking this summer?
I enjoy watching those debates and then drinking them. I, for someone who has worked in this industry for so long, I'm actually terrible at predicting trends. But if I had to predict, I'd probably say some version of an Aperol Spritz, I think. Like, I feel like Aperol Spritzes had their moment a year or two ago. And I feel like it's time for like other kinds of spritzes, or like, let's make an Aperol Spritz, but add passion fruit to it, or, something like that. Like something that takes that trend that happened and then takes it to the next level.
Yeah, I think you're right. I agree that sometimes it's more fun to just watch what bubbles up to the top and then try it for yourself. Oh, bubbles up to the top. That was a good. So I want to play a rapid fire game with you to close today. So I'll give you some questions and I'm going to make you play favorites and tell me the first thing that comes to mind.
Oh gosh. Okay. I'm ready.
Okay. Your favorite cookbook right now?
I think I have to give a shout out to my girl, Georgia Friedman. She just came out with a cookbook called Snacking Dinners. Full disclosure, I saw an advanced copy and I endorsed the book for her. It is awesome. It's like it takes like girl dinner to the next level and it's perfect for summer because you're basically just like collecting a bunch of snacks and calling it dinner. But of course she has a lot of guidance, a lot of refined ways of talking about it, or, you can upscale it or downscale it however you want. But it's a super fun cookbook. It's also gorgeous. Shout out to the photographer, Leela Seed. And yeah, I think it's a great book.
I love the sound of that. I'll have to check it out. Your favorite home brewing book that is not one of your own?
All right, I'm going to pick 2. One is the beer making book from Erica Shea and Stephen Valland. They run the Brooklyn Brew Shop. If you're in Brooklyn, you maybe have seen them around farmers markets. I actually don't know if they're doing farmers markets still, but that's where they got their start. I love their beer making book. It's just small batch brews, fun flavors, interesting combinations, and they're cool people. So I like that. And then the Big Book of Kombucha by Hannah Crum is, if you're interested in kombucha, that's the book to get. Like, it is everything A to Z, all the information, sets you up for success with making kombucha.
I love both of those. Your favorite like classic cocktail?
Ooh, I love a good gin gimlet. Make it nice and sour, and I'm there.
I think that gin is very good for like spring also. It feels really appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
A drink that you think should be more like popular or mainstream?
Ooh. You know, I feel like the sidecar is unappreciated. A sidecar is cognac, Cointreau, and lemon juice. There might be some sugar in there. Maybe some people put sugar in there. Anyway, it's just like sweet and sour. It's cozy, but still refreshing. Like, I love a sidecar, honestly, year round. Like in the summer, it feels like refreshing and like a nice summery drink. And in the fall, it feels kind of cozy and like it's like an orange color. So it just like matches the season. So yeah, I'm going to go with sidecar.
It does it all. Okay, and finally, a recipe from the book that you would recommend people make as we get into the kind of spring, like outdoor drinking season.
Ooh. Okay, if you want a little more of well, it's not more of a challenge, but it's a offbeat flavor. I love the plum yuzu recipe, plum yuzu hard seltzer. So take some fresh plums, chop them up, throw them in your hard water that you've made, and then yuzu juice you can buy at grocery stores. You can buy it online. And that combination is just so lovely, and it's beautiful. It's like the plums, depending on which like kind of plums you use, and you can use any plum that you want, it gives it this like pink, like almost like a Barbie pink color, and it's just so fun. I love that one. Yeah.
I love that. I think that sounds so great. And Emma, I've had so much fun talking with you. I'm going to go find myself a kombucha right now.
I love it. Thank you so much. This has been super fun.
This is Taste is hosted and produced by Matt Rodbard and me, Eliza Abarbanel. The show is edited by lead producer Clayton Gumbert and supervised by Pat Stango, Director of Media Production and Development at Penguin Random House. Thanks to Shalia Harris and the production team at Penguin Random House. Theme music by Steve Rydell, logo and guest illustrations by Ellie Skurzat. Visit Taste online at tastecooking.com and make sure to subscribe to our newsletter to keep updated on all cool things in the world of taste.